I'm really pleased to introduce Melissa Hart, our CMO, who just ran an awesome survey about tariffs, and she's going to share some intel. Ms. Melissa Hart, give it up. Hands together.
Thank you. It's a really funny shift in perspective to be sitting in the corner watching and then to have to come up here and do this. But as is the tradition, I'm going to try to keep the slides short here, and Kim will have the opportunity to kick me off the stage. Hi, everybody. I hope everybody's having a great day. So I have two parts of the conversation that I'd like to share today. The first part is going to be sharing a little bit of information that we have recently gathered through the survey that we ran, asking service providers and operators, how are you preparing for the impact of these tariffs that have been rolled out in recent months? But also, and probably more importantly, the second part of what I want to talk about today is actually to facilitate communication about asking you guys some questions and just throwing it back to you. So I'm going to speed through a very, very high level summary of our recent survey findings and then get to the questions. Before I do that though, when we talk about tariffs, there's two important fundamental things that I think that we should just get out of the way first, right? So the first point is that when it comes to the impact of tariffs, what arguably will be of greater impact is the downstream effects on consumer behavior and how that is going to affect things like purchase decisions, the timing of purchases, disrupted customer experiences. So in other words, when it comes to tariffs, the larger financial impact is most likely going to be less about what organizations are feeling in terms of cost and more in terms of what organizations stand to lose in terms of revenue and their, customer, their brand perceptions and things like that. So, we understand that this is one part of a greater conversation. The other important fact that we can put out there is that obviously this is a very fluid situation, and yet it is still a very important situation that I think is deserving of conversation and discussion today. So as I think Kim had said, perhaps you've read about this and you've seen this in the news recently. We recently ran a survey in mid-April, so now this is a couple of weeks ago, and we took the temperature of service providers and operators asking, how are you preparing, what are you feeling, and what are you sensing about the potential impact of tariffs on your organization? Four very high-level takeaways that we heard from survey respondents. So first, one concern, and probably the biggest one, is just like the potential for cost increases. Second, the delayed capital improvement. Third, service quality and staffing. And fourth, the potential for store closures and operational downsizing. Taking you a little bit further into this, and I will just caveat all of this by saying this is not all of the survey takeaways. This is just a very quick high-level overview, and the full findings of this we can share out via Whova immediately after today, if that would be helpful. But one question that we had asked, so to what extent do you believe that tariffs are going to impact your organization's costs? And again, this is asking of this audience of both operators and providers and of respondents that are at all different levels within an organization, but are still working within the field of facilities management in some capacity. So you can see that there are some differences in the responses. There's more that I could say just on commenting on things that we're seeing from the data, but 83% of respondents did say that they were anticipating moderate to significant impact of tariffs on their business in the next 6-12 months. Another takeaway that we saw, so we asked our survey respondents what categories of equipment, materials, supplies will tariffs impact the most for your business? And you can see on the bottom of this chart here, these are all the different suggestions that we had surveyed and asked everybody. And you can see side by side operator versus provider in the responses. 75% of operators responded that they were anticipating moderate to significant impact to their HVAC costs. And maybe that's like a, yes, well, duh. But that's something that I think is very notable to call out. Lastly, another question that we've asked is, if you've taken steps to prepare, what actions have you taken or are you considering taking? And again, just rolling up the general response from our survey audience, 54% had said that they were communicating with stakeholders, 46% said that they were adjusting their budgets, 33% had said that they're already starting to renegotiate supplier contracts. So that was my portion of sharing. I had promised that I would keep it brief so that we could make time to talk about this. I've got a few questions that I've prepared, and I'll toss these out here. Kim, if you wouldn't mind just helping me.
I will run around on my
bring
heels with the microphone.
around. Thank you.
You got
Okay,
it.
So first question, have tariffs caused any unexpected ripple effects, like workflow changes, maintenance delays, or cross-department tension within your organization?
Does anyone want to answer that boldly? Or do we just want to collectively like take a sigh and go, yeah, yes, it has. It's a deep topic. Okay, can I call on somebody? Oh, Grant. You want to answer that? What have you seen?
Well, one of the unfortunate aspects I've noticed, so in order to backstop our customers' receivables, we will buy credit insurance. So if a customer is going to spend $1 million a year, these insurance companies will backstop us to, let's say a balance of $200,000 or something like that, and you pay, let's call it $10,000 a year or something like that. So they'll analyze all these retailers according to financial health, and they give you a report according to payment histories. And what we started to see 2 weeks ago is they are dropping credit insurance on certain companies according to their tariff exposure. So if you have a prospective customer that maybe you've been working on for 18 or 24 months, but maybe they have a little bit of financial instability to begin with, what you're now confronted with is the additional uncomfortable question of, well, I know you thought you were going to pay net 60, but we might need to enforce net 20, or there's going to be a credit limit and things like that. So hopefully none of that comes to pass, because they're the conversations that we're least interested in having. But it was a unpleasant email to get, and as I thought through it, it made you realize, okay, this is not going to be a fun situation for people.
That's like a major reality check that, as much as we can ignore the news and avoid and just be like, well, Michael's had to re-tag 20,000 things. That's Michael's problem. Sorry. But clearly that's going to impact everybody depending on where you get your products. That's such a great anecdote, Grant. Thank you.
All right, I've got another question. Maybe this one will be a little bit more interesting. What's the most creative solution that your team is using right now to work around the disruptions that have been caused by tariffs? It sounds like there are definitely some signs that this is impacting some change within everybody's organization to some degree. So how are we getting creative about this other than just feeling like you're on your heels and getting reactive? Is anybody, for example, have you started stockpiling supplies, or have you switched a supplier in a way that you weren't expecting? Have you
accelerated an RFP maybe, or?
Not all at once now, please. Okay.
No, this is interesting. I think what we're sharing might be sort of heavy, number one, but also, and I can just say anecdotally from some of the conversations, it's hard to believe what's gonna actually stick and what won't stick. I don't know. I've just heard that from some of you. Okay, Jim wants to contribute.
Well, we did hear from a couple of our vendors that they were going to have material problems, challenges building some of the assets that we use within our facilities. So knowing what our overall annual budget was, we just purchased their entire stock, understanding that we don't need it now, but we're probably going to need it over the next 12 16, 18 months. So we've done that and created our own warehousing of stock so that whatever may happen in the short term, hopefully we're going to be covered from not only a supply, but a price perspective.
Can you give us just one sentence on how you actually made that happen internally? I mean, do you just have free-flowing funds where you'd be like, no problem, I'll just proactively buy things I don't have to lay out?
Well,
Okay if you do, but I don't think anybody else here does.
I mean, at the beginning of the year, I give my capital budget, and I get to use that as I see fit. So understanding what the budgets were and what the needs were, that's how I chose to spend that money.
Right. So you shifted your prioritization.
Correct.
So you might have had something else with that capital.
Correct.
Do you think anything else will suffer? Okay, now I'm getting into questions. Okay, never mind.
It may.
Jim. Thank you, Jim. Great question. Great
Okay,
answer.
what about the upside of this? Has anybody seen any good come from this in your organization? I know this might sound like a curveball question, but is there something that this made you take a closer look at? For example, one upside might be that because you purchased all of this inventory in advance, maybe if costs were to rise by end of year, you've actually saved your organization something at the end of the day or at the end of the year. Are there any other good stories out there? Yes.
Andrea.
I think one benefit that we've seen is this has forced the whole organization to look at some creative ways to be more future looking. And so the business case behind Jim's decision is as much about how we can leverage our scale to save money on not just today's issues and tariff-based cost increases, but also to have more of a holistic approach to warehousing and shifting, sending out equipment as it's needed, so we can pivot and be more reactive quicker. So we have reduced downtime and there's savings there too. So I think there's many different pieces, but the whole organization is looking at warehousing and how we can work together and leverage new systems to be more internally focused. So that's a positive.
I'm going to tack on to that question. One of the responses we saw a lot of in the survey data was that organizations were intentionally trying to buy certain types of supplies or equipment that were made in America. And sometimes that's not something that we're looking for when we're trying to just get through the normal course of business. Has anybody started doing that intentionally? And has that made any of the logistics of sourcing supplies, materials, parts, anything like that easier on you? Is it something that you're even aware of? Might not be. Yeah, sort of, kind of.
Oh, Liz. Here I go, running in the heels.
Be so careful. Be so careful.
Yeah.
As a company, Tractor has kind of shifted and tried to, for the products that we sell in store, start manufacturing more in America. I think we're at between 30 and 40% of all of our product is made in America now. And then we also have all of our distribution centers. And the way that ties in, obviously, if we're not making sales, we're not fixing stuff because we don't have the budget for it. So our supply chain team is incredible. I don't know what they're doing, but they're doing some good stuff. And I'd like to pull them in here so that we can talk about it in this industry as well. But I think that for fear of the global environment and, all the buzz and news and whether it's happening or not, I think that a lot of companies will start to shift in that direction. I see positives and negatives on both sides of it, right? There are good and bad, but as a company, they've already done that with what we're selling. And I've seen other companies that are kind of shifting to that internal technicians, right? Like they might not be outsourcing to vendor partners because they're like, if we have it in-house, it's kind of the same thing, just in a different space, is how I think about it.
Got it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, and then last question for you guys Is there something, could we create a dialogue in this room? Is there something that your vendors or your providers could do to help be a better partner and reduce some of the disruption caused by tariffs? Is there something that somebody who you're working with could do differently to ease the friction of this moment? Besides
okay. Just don't pass it on.
Passing on the tariff.
Absorb it. Oh, I just heard a verbal contract. I don't know if any of you heard that.
What about passing on knowledge? I mean, I feel like there's a lot of opacity when you're working with a partner who, for example, if you needed to buy a new HVAC unit, and that's a, $40,000, $50,000 investment, maybe more. If there were a cost factor to that had just recently been made more expensive because that unit was manufactured in China and it's subject to tariffs, would it be helpful for that provider to give you more information about ways that you could time the project differently, or that you might want to consider sourcing an alternate model but avoid, pay a little bit more in the bottom line, but not have to pay so much in terms of tariffs, for example? Is there an educational component that would help you to get ahead?
How often are you asking your vendors for information and help? That's kind of a common theme I hear is like, well, we're working with our vendors, right? Our vendors are sharing information, but are you really proactively collaborating, asking for information, learning, or are you just, the trust is there and they'll tell you when something changes that impacts you? I feel like some people are hiding from this question because there are vendors in the room.
Well, I think it's also a very fluid situation.
It's a fluid situation. Yeah. I totally get it.
Okay.
David Hussey, can I ask you one question? I'm sorry. He's like, for the last time, stop talking about me. But I'm curious, like, one of the questions was, is there a positive benefit? And as you're re-skewing these things, like, is Michael saying, well, you're in a competitive space, you have an opportunity, you're making up your pricing because of your costs going up, but do you assume like this new pricing strategy might be a positive for Michael's and maybe engage new buyers and maybe, promote more foot traffic or advertising revenue or something like that? Or is it just reactive and you're just rolling the dice and crossing your fingers? Oh. Can I do this? Sorry. Yeah. I'm calling you out.
Well, I mean, it's a little outside of my world, right? I'm in construction and facilities, but I think it's just the nature of the business. The cost goes up, the price goes up, and so it's option B. You can't close the gap on 145% tariff, right? So, but you have to be proactive in some ways. So I'm not sure who benefits from that.
That's true.
Yeah.
And, prices never really go down either. So do prices go down in retail? Except for the $5 box that I bought at Michael's, which is so amazing. I gotta tell you all about my $5 box that I got at Michael's. But I feel like prices, at least as a consumer, you don't notice pricing going down, but maybe there are sales or things like that, but it usually goes up and doesn't, no? It could go down. Okay. Very helpful discussion. I feel like this is a topic, I get it. First of all, there's a lot of political charge around tariffs and the messaging around tariffs. At the end of the day, regardless of your political view, tariffs do impact business, and tariffs are not new. Tariffs are something we've dealt with for a long time, but because of the nature of the tariffs and just sort of the weight of the tariffs, clearly we're all looking on how to adapt. So I would encourage us to keep the conversation open. You've got a lot of really smart, trusted people in the room who you can continue to lean on as you work through your tariff challenges.
Indeed. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Melissa.